These are the most terrifying vampire characters from popular movies and TV shows. Klaus Michelson. Klaus Michelson is terrifying because he combines 1,000 years of existence with the impulsivity and rage of someone who never emotionally matured past his childhood trauma. He's a hybrid, half vampire, half werewolf, which means he has abilities no other vampire possesses. He can compel other vampires, not just humans. He can create an army of hybrids loyal only to him. He can't be killed by wooden stakes, sunlight with a daylight ring, or vervain in doses that would drop other vampires. But the real horror is his psychology. Klaus doesn't just kill enemies, he tortures them creatively. He once forced a man to transition into a werewolf repeatedly, knowing each transformation breaks every bone in the body. He killed an entire bloodline of vampires just to prove a point. He daggers his own siblings and stores them in coffins for decades when they displease him. His paranoia makes him unpredictable. Klaus interprets every action as potential betrayal. Show him loyalty for years, and one perceived slight makes him turn on you viciously. He's killed allies, lovers, and family members in fits of rage, then expressed genuine confusion about why people fear him. The worst part is he's capable of love, which makes him more dangerous. When Klaus cares about someone, he becomes obsessively possessive. Threaten someone he loves, and he will burn down entire cities for revenge. His daughter Hope is his ultimate weakness and ultimate trigger. Anyone who even mentions her becomes a target. Nomak. Nomak is what happens when someone tries to engineer a superior vampire and create something that hunts vampires instead. He's a Reaper, a mutant vampire strain designed to be stronger, faster, and more efficient than standard vampires. The experiment succeeded. That's the problem. Reapers have a fundamentally different biology than standard vampires. Their mouths split open horizontally into a trifold jaw system that resembles a lamprey. When they feed, the entire jaw structure unfolds, revealing rows of teeth and a barbed tongue that latches onto victims. It's not biting, it's docking. The feeding apparatus locks onto the victim's face or neck and creates a seal, then drains them completely in under a minute. Nomak doesn't just feed on humans, he feeds on vampires. Reaper biology requires exponentially more blood than standard vampires, making humans insufficient fuel. He hunts vampire nightclubs, vampire safehouses, and vampire blood banks. Vampires, apex predators for millennia, suddenly have something hunting them. They experience prey fear for the first time in their existence. The infection process is worse than death. When Nomak feeds on a vampire, he doesn't kill them, he converts them into Reapers. Within hours, the infected vampire's jaw begins splitting. Their metabolism accelerates, they become ravenously hungry, and attack anything nearby, including other vampires. A single Reaper can convert an entire vampire nest in one night, creating exponential growth that spreads like wildfire. Reapers have no supernatural weaknesses. Garlic doesn't affect them, silver doesn't harm them, stakes don't kill them. They can walk in daylight without burning. EDTA, the anticoagulant that makes vampire blood explode, does nothing. Every traditional vampire killing method fails. The only way to kill a Reaper is catastrophic physical destruction, decapitation, explosive trauma, or UV light exposure so intense it incinerates tissue. Nomak specifically is intelligent, which makes him an extinction-level threat. Most Reapers are mindless feeding machines, driven entirely by hunger. Nomak retains full cognitive function. He plans ambushes. He targets strategic locations. He understands vampire organizational structures and systematically dismantles them. When Blade and a vampire kill squad hunt him, Nomak anticipates their tactics and turns the hunt into a massacre. His motivation is what elevates him from monster to tragic villain. Nomak didn't choose to become a Reaper. He was created in a lab by his own father, a vampire scientist who experimented on him as a child, trying to engineer superior vampires for a eugenics program. The experiments were agonizing. When the transformation completed and Nomak became a Reaper, he killed his way out of the facility and began a revenge campaign against the vampire hierarchy that sanctioned his creation. Nomak's endgame isn't survival or conquest, it's extinction. He wants to convert every vampire on Earth into Reapers, knowing that Reapers will consume all available blood in weeks, then starve to death. He's weaponizing his own existence to commit species-wide murder-suicide. When Blade finally confronts him, Nomak doesn't fight to win. He fights to spread the infection as far as possible before dying, ensuring maximum vampire casualties. The heart kills him. Reapers have reinforced bone structure protecting their heart, making them nearly invulnerable to staking. But Nomak has been waiting for someone skilled enough to penetrate that armor. When Blade drives the stake through the bone shield into Nomak's heart, Nomak smiles. He's been in constant agony since transformation. Death is relief. His last words confirm that his entire campaign was suicide by Vampire Hunter, but he took thousands of vampires with him. Damon Salvatore. Damon Salvatore is horrifying because he spent a century perfecting the art of turning murder into entertainment. He doesn't kill because he has to, he kills because he enjoys it. When Damon returned to Mystic Falls in Season 1, he had a body count in the thousands and zero remorse. He snapped necks at parties for fun. He fed on cheerleaders and compelled them to forget, treating humans like disposable juice boxes. He turned Vicky Donovan into a vampire knowing she'd likely die, just to see what would happen. The compulsion abuse is where Damon's cruelty really shows. He doesn't just use mind control for feeding, he uses it for psychological torture. He compelled Carolyn Forbes to be his personal blood bag and sex slave, erasing her memory every night so she'd wake up confused about the bite marks. That's not vampire survival instinct, that's sadism. His humanity switch makes him exponentially worse. When Damon turns off his emotions, he becomes a serial killer with supernatural powers and strategic intelligence. No guilt, no hesitation, just efficient, creative violence. He's killed pregnant women, children, and entire households without blinking. The humanity switch is supposed to be a coping mechanism for vampire grief, but Damon uses it as permission to indulge his worst impulses. The worst part is he's self-aware. He knows he's a monster, he acknowledges it, jokes about it, and continues anyway. When people call him out for killing someone, he shrugs and says something sarcastic. That casual relationship with mass murder, treating it like a personality quirk instead of a moral catastrophe, is sociopathic behavior wrapped in charm. His obsession with Catherine and later Elena shows how dangerous he becomes when fixated on someone. He killed Elena's brother Jeremy, actually killed him, temporarily, because Elena rejected him. He massacred a bus full of people to create a vampire army. He turned Elena's friend Bonnie into his personal witch servant, exploiting her feelings for him to manipulate her into dangerous magical situations. The worst part is the show frames Damon as a romantic lead. Fans excuse his atrocities because he's attractive and witty, but strip away the charisma and you have a serial killer who spent 170 years refining his techniques, views humans as food and entertainment, and only occasionally experiences guilt when it affects people he personally cares about. Eli. Eli from Let the Right One In horrifies specifically because she looks like a 12-year-old child. That appearance is a weapon more effective than any supernatural power. She uses it to trigger protective instincts in adults and friendship instincts in children, then kills them when their guard is down. Eli has been 12 years old for centuries. She was castrated and turned into a vampire as a child in the 18th century, trapping her in a prepubescent body forever. This backstory isn't just tragic, it's a horror foundation. She has an adult mind with centuries of killing experience operating inside a child's body that people instinctively trust. Her kills are brutal. She doesn't have refined vampire control. When she feeds, it's animalistic. She climbs on victims like a feral cat, bites into the neck and tears. Blood sprays across walls. The feeding frenzy looks like watching a wild animal devour prey, not a calculated predator. The child body makes this violence exponentially more disturbing because it violates every expectation of what a child should be. Eli needs permission to enter buildings. This isn't a quirky vampire rule, it's psychological manipulation. When she asks, "Can I come in?" standing outside in the snow, looking cold and vulnerable, people say yes because refusing feels monstrous. She weaponizes human decency. The moment they invite her in, she has legal, supernatural access to their home forever. What happens when someone doesn't invite her in is worse. If Eli enters uninvited, she begins bleeding from every orifice. Eyes, ears, nose, mouth, blood pours out, but she doesn't stop entering. She accepts the pain and continues forward, bleeding profusely, because the supernatural punishment for violating the invitation rule is less important than reaching her target. This demonstrates that vampire rules aren't absolute protections, they're obstacles she's willing to pay the price to overcome. Her relationship with Hoken is where the true horror lives. Hoken is her human servant, an adult man who kills people for her, drains their blood into containers, and brings it back so she can feed without hunting. He does this because he's been groomed by Eli for decades, believing he's in a relationship with her. She uses romantic manipulation on a man attracted to children, exploiting his sickness to turn him into a serial killer. When Hoken fails and is captured, Eli visits him in the hospital and feeds on him, discarding him now that he's no longer useful. Eli feels no remorse because she can't afford to. Centuries of existence have burned empathy out of her psychology. She forms attachments to humans like Oscar, not because she loves them, but because loneliness is unbearable. When Oscar becomes useful, defending her, killing for her, she trains him to become the next Hoken. The ending isn't romantic. It's the beginning of another cycle where a child is groomed into becoming a serial killer servant. Aro. Aro from Twilight is terrifying because he runs the vampire equivalent of a totalitarian government and genuinely believes he's doing it for everyone's benefit. He leads the Volturi, the oldest and most powerful vampire coven that enforces vampire law globally. Aro is approximately 3,000 years old, which means he's been consolidating power since ancient Greece. He doesn't rule through fear alone. He rules through systematic collection of gifted vampires, turning the Volturi into a supernatural military force no one can challenge. His gift is reading every thought you've ever had through physical touch. One handshake and Aro knows your entire life, every memory, every secret, every plan. You cannot lie to him. You cannot hide intentions. The moment he touches you, your mind is an open book he can flip through at leisure. This makes resistance impossible because he identifies threats before they can act. But here's what makes Aro genuinely frightening. He collects talented vampires like trophies. When he encounters a vampire with a useful gift, he offers them a choice: join the Volturi or die. If they refuse, he kills them and everyone they love to eliminate the bloodline. Alice Cullen's visions showed him doing this repeatedly throughout history. Any vampire powerful enough to threaten Volturi authority is either absorbed into the organization or exterminated. The trial scenes reveal his true nature. Aro doesn't want justice, he wants control. When the Cullens are accused of creating an immortal child, Aro assembles the Volturi Guard knowing the accusation is probably false. He's looking for an excuse to acquire Alice's precognition and Edward's telepathy. The trial is theater. He's already decided what outcome serves Volturi interests best. His cruelty is bureaucratic, which makes it worse than emotional violence. Aro doesn't kill in rage. He kills after calm deliberation, having weighed the political benefits. He'll embrace you warmly, laugh at your jokes, compliment your abilities, then order your execution with the same pleasant smile. The emotional disconnect between his friendly demeanor and his willingness to commit genocide is deeply unsettling. The immortal children law shows his capacity for absolute ruthlessness. Vampire children cannot control their bloodlust and expose the vampire world, so the Volturi made creating them punishable by death, not just for the child, but for the creator and everyone who knew about it. Aro enforces this law without exception. He's executed entire covens, burning them alive because one member created an immortal child decades ago. What makes Aro nightmare fuel is his immortality combined with his power. He will not die. He will not stop consolidating control. He's had 3,000 years to perfect surveillance networks, eliminate rivals, and position the Volturi as an unchallengeable authority. And he has infinite time ahead to continue. There is no waiting him out, no outlasting his rule. Aro is functionally eternal tyranny. The Master. The Master from the Strain TV series redefines vampire horror by making vampirism a biological weapon instead of a supernatural curse. This isn't a seductive immortal. This is a parasitic entity that treats human bodies like disposable vehicles. The Master's true form is a mass of writhing worms, thousands of bloodworms that collectively form consciousness. When you kill the body he inhabits, the worms erupt outward and search for a new host. Decapitate him, burn him, blow him apart, the worms survive and rebuild. You're not fighting a vampire, you're fighting an infestation that thinks. His appearance when inhabiting a human body is deliberately grotesque. Pale, corpse-like skin, a throat sock that pulsates when he feeds, expanding like a grotesque balloon filled with stolen blood. No fangs, instead a stinger extends from his mouth, a proboscis that punches through flesh and drains victims in seconds. The feeding process looks like watching an insect drain prey, not a vampire drinking blood. The Master converts humans through parasitic infection. His stinger doesn't just drain blood, it implants worms. Those worms travel through the victim's circulatory system, reach the brain, and rewrite neural pathways. Within hours, the person dies. Within days, they resurrect as a vampire, completely under the Master's control. Their consciousness is erased. What walks around wearing their face is a puppet with worm strings. He controls every vampire he creates through a hive mind. They see what he sees. They know what he knows. There is no individual vampire to negotiate with or turn against him because individual consciousness doesn't exist in his bloodline. Attack one vampire and every vampire in the city knows your location instantly. The Master processes information from thousands of simultaneous viewpoints, making him omniscient within his territory. The psychological horror is the loss of self. Victims remain partially conscious during transformation. They feel the worms moving through their bodies. They feel their thoughts being overwritten. They watch themselves attack loved ones and cannot stop because the Master is piloting their bodies remotely. Some victims retain enough awareness to scream internally while their bodies commit atrocities. The Master's strategic thinking operates on century-long timelines. He engineered a global pandemic to convert entire cities. He infiltrated government agencies decades before executing his plan. He identified and eliminated vampire hunters before they knew he existed. When heroes think they've discovered his weakness, they realize he leaked that information intentionally to draw them into traps. His voice carries layers of every person he's ever inhabited. When he speaks, you hear dozens of voices overlapping, men, women, children, all speaking the same words simultaneously. It's the auditory manifestation of his true nature, not one being but a collective consciousness wearing stolen bodies. Angelus. Angelus is what happens when you take a vampire who spent 150 years perfecting psychological torture and remove the soul that was keeping him in check. Angel with a soul is brooding and guilt-ridden. Angelus without a soul is one of the most sadistic vampires in fiction. He doesn't just kill victims, he studies them for weeks, learns what they love most, then destroys it in front of them before delivering the killing blow. This isn't feeding, this is art to him. His signature move is the long game psychological breakdown. When Angelus targeted Drusilla in the 1800s, he didn't just turn her into a vampire. First, he killed her entire family. Then, he stalked her for months, appearing in mirrors and shadows, making her think she was going insane. He drove her to seek refuge in a church, then killed everyone in the church on the day she was supposed to take her vows as a nun. Only after completely shattering her mind did he turn her, ensuring she'd be insane for eternity. The judge couldn't burn him. The judge is a demon that incinerates anything with humanity by touching it. Angelus walked up and let the judge touch him. Nothing happened. The judge declared that Angelus has no humanity, no compassion, no emotional warmth whatsoever. He is pure evil, concentrated into vampire form. That's not metaphor. That's a supernatural entity specifically designed to detect goodness, confirming that Angelus registers as completely absent of it. When Angelus returned in Buffy Season 2, he immediately began torturing Buffy emotionally. He left drawings of her sleeping in her bedroom to let her know he'd been watching her sleep. He killed her teacher and left the body where she'd find it. He threatened everyone she loved, not to kill them quickly, but to turn them so she'd have to stake people she cares about. Every action was calculated to cause maximum psychological damage. He killed Jenny Calendar specifically to hurt Giles. Jenny was working on a spell to restore Angel's soul, and Angelus discovered it. He could have just destroyed the spell and killed her quickly. Instead, he snapped her neck, then arranged her body in Giles' apartment, surrounded by candles and rose petals to make it look romantic. Giles came home, thinking Jenny had prepared a surprise, found her corpse, and the trauma destroyed him. That's the level of cruelty Angelus operates on. Killing isn't enough, he needs to maximize suffering. His intelligence makes him more dangerous than stronger vampires. Angelus doesn't rely on brute force. He manipulates, strategizes, and exploits weaknesses. When trapped or outnumbered, he talks his way out, turning enemies against each other. He's been documented as the vampire that other vampires fear because he doesn't follow predictable patterns. The truly horrifying part is Angel remembers everything Angelus does. When the soul returns, Angel has complete memory of every torture, every murder, every psychological game. He lives with the knowledge of what he's capable of when the soul is removed, and it can be removed again. One moment of pure happiness and Angelus returns. Angel exists in constant fear of his own potential, knowing the monster is always one trigger away. Lestat de Leoncourt. Lestat is horrifying because he treats immortality like an endless performance where humans are his audience and his food. He doesn't hide what he is. While other vampires live in shadows and maintain secrecy, Lestat becomes a rock star in the 1980s and openly sings about being a vampire. He thinks the masquerade is boring. He wants worship, attention, and fear all at the same time. This isn't recklessness, it's narcissism weaponized across centuries. Lestat's cruelty is casual. He kills without planning or remorse, treating murder like a spontaneous decision. See someone attractive? Drain them. Bored at a party? Turn someone into a vampire for entertainment. In an interview with a vampire, he turns a 5-year-old girl named Claudia into a vampire, trapping her in a child's body forever because Lewis was depressed and Lestat thought a vampire daughter would fix their relationship. The Claudia situation reveals how monstrous Lestat actually is. He turned a dying child without consent, gave her an adult mind in a body that will never mature, and raised her like a daughter while teaching her to kill. Claudia eventually tries to murder Lestat by poisoning him and slitting his throat, and Lestat survives, then forgives her and continues the twisted family dynamic like nothing happened. Lestat is unkillable through normal means. Claudia and Lewis dump his body in a swamp after cutting his throat and draining his blood. He survives. They later discovered he crawled out of the swamp, fed on rats and animals until he regained strength, then continued existing. Stabbing, draining, burning, none of it permanently kills him. He survived centuries through pure, stubborn refusal to die. His relationship with Lewis is abusive in every sense. Lestat turns Louis without explaining the reality of vampire existence, then mocks him for struggling with the moral implications of killing humans. He isolates Louis from other vampires, controls their finances, and manipulates him with affection whenever Louis considers leaving. When Louis finally tries to escape, Lestat hunts him down. But what makes Lestat truly disturbing is his self-awareness. He knows he's a monster. He knows he's selfish, cruel, and destructive, and he doesn't care. In later books, Lestat literally says he's the embodiment of everything wrong with vampires: the vanity, the violence, the refusal to feel guilt, and he celebrates it. He's not conflicted, he's proud. The 2022 TV adaptation makes Lestat even worse by adding domestic violence. He doesn't just manipulate Louis emotionally, he physically attacks him during arguments. In one scene, Lestat flies Louis into the sky and drops him from hundreds of feet, shattering every bone in his body because Louis challenged him publicly. Then he cries and apologizes and promises to change, creating the classic abuse cycle. Lestat treats immortality as permission to indulge every impulse without consequence. He's had 250 plus years to become a better person and actively chooses not to. Every decade, every century, he remains exactly as selfish and violent as when he was first turned. That's not tragic, that's willful, perpetual monstrosity. Catherine Pierce. Catherine Pierce is terrifying because she spent 500 years perfecting the art of survival through manipulation, and she'll sacrifice anyone, including people who love her, to stay alive. She's the vampire who turned Stefan and Damon Salvatore in 1864, and she did it for the most selfish reason possible. She wanted them to fight over her for eternity. She didn't love them, she loved being desired. She compelled Stefan to drink her blood without his knowledge, orchestrated both brothers getting shot so they'd transition into vampires, then faked her death and abandoned them for 145 years. Catherine's survival strategy is becoming everyone's problem simultaneously. She spent centuries making enemies: werewolves, vampires, witches, hunters, then manipulating others to protect her from the consequences. When Klaus hunts her for running from him in the 1400s, she doesn't face him. She spends 500 years using doppelgangers, body doubles, and fake deaths to stay ahead, letting innocent people die in her place. The doppelganger exploitation is genuinely evil. Catherine is a Petrova doppelganger, a supernatural genetic duplicate that appears every few generations. She discovers that Klaus needs a doppelganger to break his hybrid curse, which means certain death for whoever he uses. Instead of accepting this, Catherine tracks down future doppelgangers and uses them as decoys. She lets Elena, her exact genetic copy, walk into life-threatening situations while Catherine hides. Her relationship with Stefan shows her capacity for emotional terrorism. Catherine returns to Mystic Falls and pretends to be Elena, sleeping with Stefan while he thinks it's his girlfriend. When the deception is revealed, Catherine laughs about it. She intentionally traumatizes Stefan by making him question every intimate moment, unsure if it was Elena or Catherine. That's psychological abuse designed to destroy his ability to trust. Catherine has no loyalty to anyone. She's betrayed every ally she's ever had the moment it became convenient. She worked with Klaus, then betrayed him. She allied with Elijah, then abandoned him. She befriended Caroline and Bonnie, then used them as vampire shields when threatened. Even her own daughter, who she gave up in the 1400s, becomes a manipulation tool when Catherine discovers she survived. The humanity switch doesn't affect Catherine because she barely has humanity when it's on. Most vampires turn off emotions to escape grief. Catherine's emotions are functional. She uses them strategically. She cries to gain sympathy, expresses love to secure protection, and shows vulnerability to manipulate people into underestimating her. Then she stabs them in the back, literally and metaphorically. When Catherine gets the cure for vampirism forced on her and becomes human again, she doesn't become sympathetic, she becomes more dangerous. Now mortal and aging rapidly, she body jumps into Elena, possessing her descendant's body and erasing Elena's consciousness. Catherine wears Elena's life like a costume, sleeping with Elena's boyfriend, sabotaging Elena's friendships, and committing murders that Elena will be blamed for. Catherine's final act proves she learned nothing in 500 years. When dying and facing hell, she doesn't seek redemption. She tries to drag everyone she's ever wronged into hell with her, out of spite. Her last words aren't apologetic or reflective, they're vindictive. Catherine Pierce spent 5 centuries being selfish, and she died exactly the same way. Dracula. Dracula in the 1992 Gary Oldman adaptation is horrifying because he combines centuries of predatory intelligence with powers that operate outside natural law. He doesn't look like one thing. Dracula shapeshifts constantly, appearing as an old man with a grotesque mustache, then a younger, seductive nobleman, then a wolf, then a bat creature, then a mass of rats. You never know what form he'll take, which means you can't prepare defenses. The thing you're talking to might not even be his real body. His powers violate physics. Dracula walks on walls and ceilings like gravity doesn't apply to him. He controls weather, summoning storms and fog to cover his movements. He commands wolves, rats, and bats as extensions of his will. When he travels, he doesn't need to physically move. He can dissolve into mist and reform elsewhere. There's no containing something that can turn into smoke. The age factor makes Dracula exponentially more dangerous. He's not a vampire who's been around for decades or even a century. He's centuries old, possibly from the 1400s, which means he's witnessed the fall of empires and adopted to every era. He speaks multiple languages fluently. He understands modern technology and ancient magic equally. You can't outsmart him through historical knowledge because he lived through that history. Dracula's feeding is predatory and sexual in ways that make it deeply uncomfortable. When he feeds on Lucy, it's not a quick bite, it's a prolonged assault that leaves her drained and transformed over multiple nights. The film frames it as seduction, but it's really systematic parasitism. Lucy doesn't consent. She's compelled, drained repeatedly, and turned into a vampire against her will. His obsession with Mina reveals how dangerous he becomes when fixated. Dracula believes Mina is the reincarnation of his dead wife from 400 years ago. This isn't romantic, it's possession. He stalks her, invades her dreams, and forces a blood bond by making her drink his blood. When Mina tries to resist, Dracula overrides her will through the blood connection, pulling her toward him against her conscious desire. The blood bond itself is a form of corruption. Once Mina drinks Dracula's blood, she becomes partially vampire, connected to his mind, vulnerable to his influence, and slowly transforming. If Dracula isn't killed, Mina will eventually become a full vampire under his control. He's weaponizing her own body against her, turning her biology into a timer counting down to complete domination. Dracula's castle is an extension of his power. The architecture doesn't follow normal rules. Rooms connect in impossible ways, gravity shifts, and time moves differently. People who enter become disoriented and trapped. The castle isn't just his home, it's a living trap designed to confuse and capture victims. The building itself is predatory. What makes this version of Dracula particularly nightmarish is the tragic origin story that doesn't excuse his actions. He became a vampire after renouncing God when his wife committed suicide. This backstory gives him motivation, but 400 years of murdering innocents can't be justified by grief. Dracula has had centuries to process his loss, and instead of healing, he chose to become a predator who recreates his trauma by turning other people's loved ones into monsters. The Volturi Guard. The Volturi Guard are horrifying not as individuals but as a collective, a vampire death squad assembled specifically to eliminate any threat to vampire authority through specialized supernatural torture. Jane is the worst of them. She looks like a young girl, maybe 12 or 13, with an angelic face and a voice that sounds innocent. Then she makes eye contact and says pain, and you experience agony beyond anything physically possible. Your nervous system convinces you you're burning alive from the inside out. Every nerve fires simultaneously. Victims collapse, screaming, begging for death. The pain isn't real damage, it's purely psychological torture. Jane doesn't leave marks, she doesn't break bones, she rewires your brain's pain receptors to maximum while you remain fully conscious. Victims describe it as worse than actual burning because there's no unconsciousness, no shock response, no physical injury to focus on, just pure interpreted agony that Jane can sustain for hours. Her twin brother Alec has the opposite power. He removes all senses. He releases a mist that spreads across an area, and anyone it touches loses sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, and awareness of their own body. You're conscious but completely cut off from reality. You can't see attackers, you can't hear warnings, you don't feel the ground under your feet. Then the Volturi kill you while you're trapped in sensory void, and you never see it coming. Alec's power is worse than Jane's in some ways because it's not pain, it's absolute helplessness. At least with pain you know what's happening. With Alec's mist, you're erased from your own perception. Some victims go insane from even brief exposure because the human mind isn't designed to process complete sensory absence while remaining conscious. Dimitri is the Volturi's tracker. Once he's encountered you, even once, even briefly, he can track you anywhere on Earth. There is no hiding from Dimitri. Run to another continent, hide in underground bunkers, surround yourself with other vampires. Doesn't matter. Dimitri knows exactly where you are at all times. He's described as the reason no one escapes the Volturi. You can't run from someone who has a supernatural GPS lock on your location. Alec and Jane were turned as children specifically because Aro wanted their powers. They were witch children in medieval Europe, being burned at the stake for their abilities. Aro saved them by turning them into vampires, then raised them as loyal executioners. They've spent centuries killing on Aro's orders, developing zero empathy because they've been weaponized since childhood. Chelsea manipulates emotional bonds. She can sever relationships or create loyalty. When the Volturi recruit vampires, Chelsea breaks their emotional connections to friends and family, then forges artificial loyalty to the Volturi. She's the reason the guard stays fanatically obedient. Their love for Aro isn't real, it's manufactured, and they don't know it's fake, which makes them perfect soldiers. The Volturi guard operates as a coordinated execution unit. Jane inflicts pain to immobilize targets, Alec removes senses to prevent escape, Dimitri tracks runners, Chelsea breaks alliances, Felix and the others provide physical combat. They've refined this system over thousands of years. When the Volturi decide you're a threat, you don't fight one vampire, you fight a supernatural kill team designed specifically to counter every possible defense. Cole Michelson is the most violent and unstable of the original vampires, which is saying something in a family that includes Klaus. He spent 1,000 years killing for entertainment. While Klaus kills strategically and Elijah kills reluctantly, Cole kills recreationally. He's described as having murdered more people than any other Michelson, and that's competing against siblings who've each existed for a millennium. His body count is estimated in the tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands. Cole was daggered repeatedly by Klaus for centuries because he was too chaotic to control. Every time Klaus needed him neutralized, he'd stab Cole with a silver dagger, putting him in magical stasis and storing him in a coffin. Cole has spent more time daggered than awake over the past 1,000 years. When he's finally undaggered in the present day, he's been imprisoned for a century and immediately goes on a killing spree. His magic background makes him more dangerous than other vampires. Before becoming a vampire, Cole was a witch, one of the most powerful in his generation. He knows magic systems, occult rituals, and supernatural mechanics that most vampires never learn. Even though vampires can't perform magic, Cole's knowledge lets him exploit magical weaknesses, create supernatural weapons, and manipulate witches into doing his bidding. Cole's hunt for Silas reveals his obsession with dark magic. Silas is an ancient immortal who Cole sees as an abomination that could end the world. Cole spends decades researching Silas, trying to prevent his awakening. But Cole's methods involve torturing witches for information, killing anyone connected to the cure that could awaken Silas, and slaughtering entire bloodlines to eliminate threats. His goal might be preventing apocalypse, but his methods are indistinguishable from terrorism. The way Cole treats Davina shows he's capable of genuine affection, which makes him more horrifying because it proves he chooses violence. Davina is a young witch he develops feelings for, and for her, Cole restrains his violent impulses and acts almost human. This proves he can control himself. He simply chooses not to most of the time because he enjoys killing. Cole's death count includes entire covens of witches. He's hunted witches specifically because their magic poses a threat to vampires, killing them systematically across centuries. When witches finally kill Cole in retaliation, it's presented as justified revenge for genocide. His bloodline, every vampire he or his descendants created, dies with him, meaning Cole's death kills potentially thousands of vampires simultaneously. Even after resurrection in a witch body, Cole continues the same patterns. Being brought back doesn't make him grateful or reformed. He uses his new magical abilities to continue manipulating, killing, and pursuing power. Death didn't change him. 1,000 years didn't change him. He's a static force of chaos who refuses character growth because violence is his entire personality. Armand. Armand is the oldest living vampire in Anne Rice's universe at approximately 500 years old, and he spent those centuries perfecting the art of manipulation disguised as philosophy. He looks like a teenage boy, eternally 17 with angelic features and innocent eyes. That appearance is a weapon. People underestimate him constantly because he looks harmless, then discover too late that Armand has been orchestrating their destruction for months. He's weaponized the instinct to protect children by wearing a child's face while committing centuries of atrocities. He runs the Théâtre des Vanpires in Paris, a theater where vampires perform murders on stage for human audiences who think it's special effects. Humans pay money to watch real people get killed, believing it's elaborate fakery. Armand has monetized murder as entertainment, turning feeding into a theatrical performance that hides in plain sight. It's genius and horrifying simultaneously. His treatment of Louise reveals his cruelty. When Louise and Claudia arrive in Paris seeking other vampires, Armand welcomes them, then immediately begins plotting Claudia's death. She's a child vampire, illegal under vampire law, and Armand uses that technicality to justify execution. But he doesn't kill her quickly. He has his coven lock Claudia in a courtyard where sunrise will burn her alive, forcing her to wait hours knowing exactly how she'll die. Armand's obsession with Louise drives everything he does. He wants Louise as a companion, but Claudia is in the way, so he orchestrates her execution while comforting Louise about the tragic necessity of vampire law. He kills Louise's daughter figure, then positions himself as Louise's emotional support through the grief. That's psychological manipulation at a master level, creating the trauma and the solution simultaneously. The coven loyalty Armand commands is built on fear and centuries of conditioning. He's led the Paris coven for hundreds of years, turning vampires and training them to obey without question. When Santiago challenges his authority, Armand doesn't argue, he orchestrates his death and makes it look like justice. The coven learns quickly that disagreeing with Armand is fatal. Armand's philosophical speeches about vampire nature are manipulation tools. He frames murder as artistic expression, describes himself as a dark angel, and presents vampirism as tragic beauty. It's romanticized serial killing. When newer vampires like Louise struggle with guilt, Armand doesn't offer genuine comfort, he offers justifications that enable continued violence. He's not a philosopher, he's a cult leader who's had 500 years to refine his rhetoric. His immortality has warped his psychology completely. Armand has watched every person he's ever known die, outlived entire civilizations, and exists in permanent isolation because relationships with mortals are temporary and relationships with vampires are strategic. This hasn't made him sympathetic, it's made him detached from consequences. Death means nothing to someone who's seen thousands of deaths across centuries. The 2022 AMC adaptation makes Armand even more manipulative by revealing he's been controlling the narrative of Louise's story the entire time. Everything viewers see is potentially edited by Armand to make himself look better and rivals look worse. He's rewriting history in real time, and Louise doesn't even realize his memories have been altered. That's gaslighting on a historical scale. Victoria. Victoria is terrifying because she combines intelligence, tactical planning, and single-minded vengeance into a multi-year campaign to destroy the Cullens. Her gift is self-preservation, supernatural instincts that help her evade danger. She automatically knows escape routes, senses threats before they manifest, and adapts to changing circumstances instantly. This makes her almost impossible to catch because she's always one step ahead of pursuers. The Cullens chase her for months and she consistently escapes through terrain they didn't anticipate she'd use. Victoria's motivation is revenge for James's death. Edward killed James in the first Twilight book, so Victoria decides to kill Edward's mate, Bella, to make him feel equivalent loss. But she doesn't attack directly because she knows the Cullens would destroy her. Instead, she builds an army of newborn vampires over months, creating a disposable attack force. The newborn army strategy shows Victoria's tactical intelligence. Newborn vampires are physically stronger than older vampires temporarily, but they're uncontrollable and expendable. Victoria creates 30 newborns, knowing most will die in the assault on the Cullens, but the sheer numbers will overwhelm defenses long enough for her to reach Bella. She's weaponizing disposable soldiers like military strategy. Victoria doesn't fight fair. When confronted, she runs and leads pursuers into traps. She uses newborns as distractions while she repositions. During the final battle, she lets her newborn army engage the Cullens and the werewolf pack, while she circles around looking for Bella. She's not a warrior, she's an assassin who uses overwhelming force as camouflage. Her treatment of Riley demonstrates her manipulation capacity. Riley is a newborn vampire she turned and convinced he's special to her, that they are building a future together. In reality, Riley is a disposable lieutenant she's using to control the newborn army. She sends him into combat situations she knows he'll probably die in, all while pretending to care about him. When he finally realizes the betrayal, Victoria has already positioned her next escape. The patience Victoria displays is uncommon among vampires. Most would attack immediately out of rage. Victoria waits, plans, recruits, and executes over months. She knows one vampire can't beat the Cullens, so she builds a force that can. She knows attacking Forks directly would trigger werewolf intervention, so she trains the army in Seattle far enough away to avoid detection until ready. Every move is calculated. Victoria's death comes from her evasion instinct failing. Edward can read minds and predict her movements, while Seth the werewolf is fast enough to cut off escape routes. Even then, she nearly escapes multiple times before Edward finally decapitates her. It takes a mind reader and a werewolf working in perfect coordination to counter her self-preservation gift. Any other opponent, and Victoria would have survived to try again.